to the FNZ 90 Plus Free podcast, where free football supporters take a look into the dressing room, chatting to former professional footballers about their experiences on and off the pitch. I'm your host, Ashley Symonds. If you are joining us again tonight, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms and leave a 5-star rating where possible. Also, tell your mates, where we are. Get them over to the channel. Have a listen. Tonight, I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Tux and Becks. Becks, I'll start with you this week, mate. I heard you had a bit of trouble this week ordering a German football shirt. Question is, did you complain in English or German?
Oh, mate, it's the worst, the absolute worst. Far from wunderbar. Far from wunderbar. And as you can see, we got there in the end. The old Fortuna shirt is on.
Yeah, that's a Fortuna shirt, mate.
Didn't give him any luck.
What gave you the inspiration to get that one then?
Just they're affiliated with our beloved Ipswich Town, but just a great club, really. Nice club, Good atmosphere. Want to get out there sometime.
Yeah, maybe we can do that next season when the gates open again. But Tux, after last week's escapade, mate, have you sorted out your world clock so we don't get any of our guests confused with timings?
Yeah, definitely. I've got our current guest tonight. He's turned up on time, so all good. So, yeah.
Well, to no further avail then, let's go. Tonight we're joined by a former defender who became a manager and quite a popular manager in today's game. As a player, this player won the League Cup with Leicester City and had notable spells with Villa, Blackburn before captaining Blackpool. As a manager, this man has managed some huge football clubs, having successfully guided Blackpool, Leeds and Preston to promotion from League One to the Championship. It's Simon Grayson. Simon, welcome to the show, mate. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, good, fine, thank you.
Good to hear. Simon, as this is a new show and you won't be familiar with the format, I'll just give you a quick rundown of how it works. Just imagine you're in a pub with three blokes and for some strange, unapparent reason, you need to impress us with your best football stories that you've got in the locker. I have no doubt in my mind that you have some big ones to share. Is that okay?
I will try my best.
Brilliant. Tux, you'll kick us off, mate, so go for it.
Hi, Simon. Thanks again for joining us on tonight's episode. Before we come on to your career as a professional footballer, I'd just like you to sort of take us back in time to where your love of football came from. I think one aspect of a footballer's life that's often overlooked is where the love of the game actually comes from. So from watching games, whether that be attending matches at a club you or your family supported or watching TV, what did football mean to you as a child growing up, and what memories can you kind of share with us?
My main memories really came from my father, to be fair. My dad, he was a school teacher. I went to the same school as he taught at, and he basically was he was a PE teacher, ran the district teams, teams. It was not the money that there was, but obviously in terms of modern day football, and chose a profession of being a teacher. So would mainly through the winter months go and watch him play football wherever he was playing. Me and my brother and another group of lads, whatever age we were at, we would just probably kick a ball around the back on another pitch behind the back of the goals. And then we would do the same thing in the summer when it became cricket season. He was a good cricketer as well as my dad. And so the summer would be football again, but cricket as well. So it was really my dad bringing us right the way through in that level. Obviously, play for your district team and your county team. You get spotted when you're a younger player. Not like now, you weren't going to football clubs when you're 6, 7 and 8. It was more about really then sort of you could only sign at 14. I went to, because I was brought up in a small village in North Yorkshire, just north of Harrogate. I went to Leeds, Middlesbrough, Sunderland a little bit, Southampton as well. And then it just became, at 14 really, I was doing really well in around England schools level as well. And then Leeds United asked me to sign schoolboy forms, and it's quite strange even now. The first time that you get to Ellen Road, you're signing your schoolboy forms, and there's this lad next to me who I'd never met before. He had this, well, it was a strange accent to me coming from a small town in North Yorkshire. Anyway, he was from North Wales, and he was a player called Gary Speed. We were 14 together and signed on the same day for Leeds United, and obviously we did our apprenticeships together and played in the reserves together. I was fortunate that I made my debut before him, but he went on to play a lot more for Leeds United.
So was there a particular team? I don't know if it was Leeds United, but was there a particular team that you followed or your family followed that actually got you into your love of football?
Yeah, Leeds United is the team that I support, and so it was a dream really to sign for them at 14. Didn't get a chance to watch them too much because them Saturday afternoons, my dad would be playing, or I'd been playing for the school, a district, and then getting to Leeds, which was about 50 minutes away, wasn't always easy to do. And I suppose when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, Leeds weren't a great team, to be fair, so didn't have too many heroes to follow really in that respect. But yeah, it was a team that I supported, wanted to play for, and was very fortunate to do that and ultimately go on to manage them.
So Simon, yeah, so your career ended at Blackpool and you went straight into management, which is something quite unusual, really. We know you don't see it so much nowadays, a player going straight from his playing career into manager. So talk us through how that sort of transition. I'm guessing you were doing your coaching badges at the time. That was sort of your first steps into management, but ending your playing career and then becoming a manager straight away.
Yeah, I was playing at Blackpool still, doing the reserves on a Tuesday, Wednesday. I'd done quite a few of my badges already, and I was ready for the next step. Really, at 35, I was probably set from retiring and packing in to go to another job. Actually, I'd been offered a job with somebody as a first team coach, stroke assistant manager, who had done some of my courses that I've been on with. So I went to Colin Henry, who was the manager at the time. I said, look, this is what I want to do. And he says, look, you're fine. I then went to Carl Oyston, who was the owner of Blackpool at that particular time. And he turned around and says, no, you can't. We're not letting you do that. So I says, why not? And he said, well, I'm going to sack Colin and you're going to take over as manager. So I sort of fell into it a little bit. I thought my natural progression from playing, doing my badges would be maybe a first team coach, assistant manager, and then see how it goes in terms of would I want to be a manager somewhere down the line. But I got that opportunity very quickly. So I'd had a little bit of the transformation of being in a dressing with some players and then taking them in the reserves the following day. I think they respected me a lot when I was doing that because I was the captain of the team still. But then when that opportunity came along, I think the biggest thing that I had to make sure I did was was making some real tough, ruthless decisions. Mates who were sat next to me in a dressing room, I was either dropping them or releasing them from the contracts that following summer. And so it was tough. But the best thing that I ever did was to bring in Tony Parks, who'd been at Blackburn Rovers for 30, 40 years, been a caretaker manager. He was a first-team coach when I was there as a player. Huge amount of respect for Tony. And he was out of work, and I took him alongside me because I just needed somebody of that wealth of experience. And he was there to calm me down at times when I was going to probably make some rash decisions. And so that was the best thing that I could have done, really, to help me along my way.
Yeah, I look at your Blackpool squad, I've done my research before coming on, and the squad you built, it's something that I've seen quite a lot through your career. You've built some amazing teams, which have maybe, you've got them from League One to the Championship, and then they've, just as your time's ended with that club, the next couple of years they've really kicked on. But it's a lot of your signings. I look at that Blackpool team when Ian Holloway took them to the Premier League, but a lot of that team is made up of players that you brought in. As another team as well that we want to jump into, which a lot of our listeners will probably known you for, is your time at Leeds United. And a lot has been made at the minute about how, it's difficult. It's such a big, tough job to get them out of the Championship into the Premier League. Talk about trying to get arguably one of the biggest clubs in the country out of League One. The pressure on you being a local boy. What was the pressure like in that sort of situation?
Yeah, it wasn't easy because I've been in League One for, I think it was 2, maybe 3 years since I've been there, since when I walked into the club. Probably just outside the playoffs, which wasn't certainly good enough for a team the stature of Leeds United. They thought relegation from the Championship to League One would probably just last a year. But it was the hardest part that I think people eventually realised was every game was a cup final for the opposition. In terms of they would love coming to Ellen Road in front of 20-odd thousand. All of a sudden, I would go to a game the week before. I don't know, say for example, we're playing, I'll use Accrington, for example, say I went to watch them the previous week, and there'd be about 1,500 people there. There wouldn't be a great deal of atmosphere. And then all of a sudden, Leeds come into town. It's a full allocation. Leeds were bringing 4,000 or 5,000, whatever allocation we were given as an away team. And all of a sudden, there's this atmosphere. Players are raising the game, and it was a cup final every week that we had to deal with. And there was obviously a lot more pressure as the time went. In my first year, I took over at Christmas time. We managed to get to the playoff semi-final, lost to Millwall. But then the following year, we managed to get promoted, finishing second to Norwich. But ultimately, that had a lot of roller coaster rides along the way, from cruising at Christmas to going on a real good cup run to then having to win the last game of the season to get promoted. And so managing a club like Leeds, as much as it's ever your dream to do that, especially for myself, it does carry a lot of expectancy level, as it is doing now. And we only saw last year about Leeds and how they sort of crumbled in the playoff semi-finals.
It's certainly not an easy job, and something Ash is going to allude to now. I think he's going to talk about that famous win at Old Trafford, which I, for one, United at that time was a team that I think everyone loved to hate, and I think everyone's a Leeds fan that day. So Ash, I'll hand over to you, mate.
Yeah, so Simon, I've got a personal insight into what it's like to live in a Leeds household. My dad was a Leeds fan, and for the most part of my childhood, I grew up a Leeds fan. It wasn't until we got relegated from the Premier League that I came to my senses and moved on from there. But
who do you support now then?
Yeah, we won't talk about that. Let's just summarise your time at Leeds, all right? Because you've got a number of records, a number of personal records as a manager that many managers would love to have at Leeds United. Look, you won 11 home games on the bounce, matching a 40-year-old record, previously set under Don Revie. I mean, what else have we got here? You led Leeds to a 1-0 victory away to Manchester United, the first time that's happened since 1981. You're the man who got Leeds United out of League One. I mean, it's no mean feat. You must be proud of your time at Leeds, being a boyhood fan of the club.
Yeah, definitely. And when I got the call to go to Leeds, people probably don't really realise that I left Blackpool, who were in the Championship at the time, to drop down to League One. And regardless probably of me supporting the club as well, it was too good opportunity because of the history and the tradition of what the club had done, where it had been, to go manage and the supporters. So regardless of me being a boyhood fan, it was all about trying to take on one of the sleeping giants of English football and try and get it back to where it belonged. And I remember the day very clearly. My first game, Boxing Day against Leicester, and walking down the tunnel, and you're thinking, wow, some absolute legends of the game have been managing Leeds United and walked down this corridor and the tunnel and then into the dugouts as well. So a very proud moment. But I knew from that day on, I was there to work, and I would only be judged on my results, not because I was a Leeds United supporter. And ultimately managed to fulfil the ambition that everybody wanted, and with a promotion. And I like to think that I left the club in a far better state than when I walked in there.
Yeah, and it must be such a surreal situation to be. Yeah, I mean, you must have imagined your career being a player for Leeds United, not a manager. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. Look, when you're there, I never once thought that I was ever going to be the manager of Leeds United, following in the likes of Billy Bremner, Don Revie, Howard Wilkinson. And I had a tear in my eye when I left as a 22-year-old and thinking that I'll never come back to do anything at this football club again. And to then get the call so young into my managing career, probably I was only 3 years into it probably. It was just dreams come true. But ultimately, as I said earlier, then dreams come true, but I had to then be judged on being a football manager and not who I was previously.
Yeah. Let's just quickly look back then at your time at Blackpool then, just to summarise the end. Am I right in thinking that there was a lot of trouble between you and the club with regards to your contract and how they saw you as the manager? And I mean, let's just talk about Blackpool in itself. At the time, it was their first season back in the second tier of English football for 29 years. You finished 19th the season before you left. The club's highest place finish in the Football League in 37 years. I mean, they owed you something, didn't they? If Leeds are going to come calling, take the job, Simon. Was it like that?
Well, that's how I thought it might pan out, but it wasn't probably great timing because it was just before Christmas. And I remember we were doing a signing session in one of the big lounges with all the players, and there was, I don't know, a host of TVs around the room. And all of a sudden it came on breaking news, as it does on Sky, that Leeds United have offered, want permission to speak to me at Blackpool. And you can imagine players next to me, everybody else. And I'll be honest, I knew that was going to be happening, because people should be naive enough not to know that. But it was difficult, because Carl Oyston, one, he gave him a chance in the first place, but ultimately as well, he thought that he had a good manager on his hands and he didn't want to lose one. So I can see what you were saying, that he maybe should have let me go without any contesting anything. But then I resigned the next morning, because I knew that's all I could do, really. And then there was court cases that were going off. Ken Bates had said, look, whatever happens in terms of Blackpool, however they want to deal with this, we'll back you all the way. With you're our manager, we'll take them to court and this, that and the other. And then on the doorsteps of the Football League, it got all resolved. This was probably 4 or 5 months later anyway, but we got there in the end, in terms of without too much legal ramifications, really.
Yeah. So let's just go back to Leeds for my final question before you pass you back to Tux. Leeds United, what was your favourite memory? And I mean, I'm in no way, shape or form a Leeds fan anymore, but I can remember watching that game, like Mark said, that was on BBC at the time, I remember it. And Jermaine Beckford scored that goal, and to be honest, mate, it still sends shivers up my spine when I think about it. And I'm not even a Leeds fan. Just tell us, was that your favourite memory as a Leeds manager?
It's very difficult to split the two real great moments that I had there, and winning promotion on the last game of the season, and the emotions that we had to go through to do that. Look, when you're at Old Trafford, you've beat the reigning Premier League champions, who had a real strong team out with Rooney, Berbatov, Neville, Wes Brown, and then all of a sudden Giggs and Valencia are all coming on. So Alex Ferguson wouldn't want to get beat by one of his arch rivals, and the rivalry was there. We had 9,000 supporters there, and they were desperate not to get beat by this League One club, never mind just Leeds United. Like, it wasn't a Premier League game anymore. It was a League One against the Premier League champions. So to manage to do that, and even now when I look back, and I've said this in a lot of interviews recently, that even when it goes up the additional time, extra injury time, I'm still thinking there's going to be 15 minutes. It's going to be Fergie time. They're going to go and score 3. But fortunately, we got through that. But I think probably the proudest game was the Bristol City game to clinch promotion, because we had 38,000 in the stadium, and all we had to do, when I say only, we only had to beat Bristol Rovers at home, nothing to play for. And really, you're just thinking, well, this should be quite an easy ride, really, given the players that we've got and where we are in the division. But then one of the weirdest games that you can imagine as a manager is that 10 minutes before half time, you go down to 10 men, Max Gradle gets sent off. All of a sudden, you're thinking, right, well, what am I going to do with 10 men? I had plan B, plan C as well, thinking about it, calming the players down in the dressing room, because it was all kicking off with Max and stuff like that. And I do remember walking down the tunnel with Daniel Jones, who had been in this sort of little melee. Well, Max deserved to get sent off because he stood on him, but I think Daniel Jones made a little bit more of it. So I was next to him as we were walking down the tunnel at half time, and I said, look, just remember where you're going to be playing second half, and all the best getting off this pitch if we don't win it. Basically, he was going to be playing left back in the northeast corner, which is the furthest point away from the ground and of the tunnel. So that just came into my head, so I said that to him. And then obviously we go out, I think, thinking, right, let's start the game positively, what we're going to do. And before you know it, 2 minutes into the second half, we're 1-0 down. Darryl Duffy scores. And then it's all like, you could hear a pin drop inside, and all the other teams who were below us were doing what they needed to do. And then made a couple of substitutions, and then Johnny Howson scored within, 5-10 minutes of him coming on. And a fantastic goal, he bent it into the top corner, and the place just erupted. You cannot imagine what it was like. It was like we had all of a sudden 14, 15 players, and they were down to about 7, 8 aside for them. And players that were doing quite decent jobs for him at the time all of a sudden became a nervous wreck. And then Jermaine got his winner 10 minutes later after Johnny's goal. So once we got the second goal, should I say, we never looked in any doubt. The Bristol Rovers players didn't want to be there, you know what I mean? And then ultimately as well, just to finish off on this story, just as the final whistle's going, Daniel Jones is stood right in front of the dugouts, so he's literally 10 yards away from the tunnel.
So he's running for his life. You've
Yeah.
just quickly reminded me there of some of the great players you had at the time. I mean, you had correct me if I'm wrong. Becchio, Beckford, Snodgrass, Howson, Johnson, all of them players playing at the same time for Leeds United. You're bound to get promoted if you think about those players and the careers they've had. I mean, they were great for Leeds, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, but they all had this exceptional ability, but they're all real good lads to work with as well. And most of them players I'm keeping in touch with now. And on that particular day, two of my absolute warriors were injured. Richard Naylor and Paddy Kisnorbo.
I remember him. Yeah, he's a great player.
Them two would run through a brick wall for me, and they weren't available on that particular day. But we had a real good team, and you had people like Kilkenny and Gradle, as you mentioned, and then we'd have a couple of lads on loan from Premier League clubs. If we'd been able to manage to keep all this group together without selling them and other players that came and then got sold, I would have thought Leeds United might be back in the Premier League right now.
Simon, I just want to touch upon your time after Leeds. So, you had some success. Your next two clubs, obviously, you was there at Huddesfield, not too long, but then you obviously went to Preston North End as well. So, in both of those, you experienced playoffs, sort of disappointments, success. But what's your kind of highlights from those? Your time at both of those clubs. What can you sort of delve into there?
The Huddesfield one is probably the most bizarre penalty shootout that you've ever seen. Yeah. It was a dour 0-0 game, went to extra time. Going back a little bit, I'd only been left Leeds 10 days and I got the call from Huddesfield, who were in the top six, but decided to get rid of Lee Clark. And I came in, took them to the playoff final, and then we missed the first three penalties, and you're just thinking, this isn't going to be an idea. And then all of a sudden, they missed a couple, and it's all level. And all our main players that were really the confident, the experienced players, you'll know some of Alan Lee and people like that, they were like missing, they missed them. Jordan Rhodes didn't even take one till later on. And all of a sudden, we're going into like the lads who didn't want to take them, were putting them in the top corner, sending the keeper the wrong way. And then it went down to the goalkeepers, and Alex Smithies smashed his into the roof of the net. And Steve Symonds came to take his and fired it straight over the bar. And quite ironic or strange, probably the better phrase, was that summer we got promoted, I got offered to sign Steve Simonson for Huddesfield, and I'm thinking, there's no way I'm doing this based on this theory that everybody would be like throwing around, the rumours of throwing the match as such. So proud to take a club forward. Fortunately, I just didn't get enough time, I thought, in Huddesfield. In the Championship early on, we went to September, October time, we were in the top six, and then went on an average run, and Dean decided to change his mind. So I left there. Again, 10 days later, Preston approached me to go and manage their football club, and they were sixth from bottom in League One, and I thought, was it worth it? Was it too much of a gamble, being that I'd been in the Championship for the last 2-3 years as well? But I just looked at it and thought, this has got a fantastic base to work from. The owner, Trevor Hemmings, Peter Ridsdale, when you was a young kid, when he was on the board at Leeds, was very sort of open about the situation, and had a wonderful 4.5 years there.
Yeah, so after you left Huddesfield, obviously it was Preston's gain in a way, because obviously they got promotion as well for you. So, I mean, you were there for quite a while, and you weren't really there, at Huddesfield for quite a long time. So it must have been nice to actually given a bit of a chance to, prove what you could do at Preston, obviously. So if you could take me sort of like through your time there.
Yeah, well, as I said, they were in the bottom six when I took over from Graham Wesley, and there was a real sort of there just wasn't a connection between the manager and the supporters. There was a lot of negativity around. I'm not sure too many players really sort of got on with Graham in terms of his ideas and how he wanted the game to be played. And everybody's different without a shadow of doubt. But I just looked at it and thought, this is probably a club where we can and listening to what Peter had said, that we were going to be there for a long time to turn it around and build a football club. And I've been at Blackpool three and a bit years, Leeds 3 and a bit years, and I like building clubs and taking it to another level and trying to give it some sustainability over a longer period of time. And Peter allowed me to do that. So the first port of call was to make sure we didn't go down, because I went in February, so we had 3-4 months to make sure that didn't happen, and we did that quite easily. And then we recruited really well in the summer. And that following end of that season, we lost in the playoff semi-final against Rotherham. And then we're going to the following season as one of the favourites for the division, based on how well we've done the previous year, and then the new players that had signed. And then we got to January, and we were still doing in a strong position. It was a 3-way tie, really. Us, Bristol City and MK Dons were going right down to the wire. We lost one game since the end of January and didn't get automatic promotion. And that was on the last game of the season when we went to Colchester, which meant then we had to go into the playoffs. And that's probably one of my sort of proudest moments, that period of 2 to 3 weeks from losing the Colchester game, where the players were down on the knees, they were down on everything, you know what I mean? They were sort of lower than a snake's belly. And I just managed to galvanise a group of players with the rest of my staff, from stopping the bus after the game. We were flying back from Stansted probably, and there was nothing being said on the bus, and I just knew I had to stop the bus, speak to the players again, after, even though I'd spoke to them in the dressing room, and said, look, we could be we could be on a beach tomorrow. You've got a second chance, and believe me, the best way to get promoted is winning at Wembley. So let's go and try and do that. And I give them the next day off, and then from the 2 semi-final games against Chesterfield, who had a strong team of Clucas and Roberts and Doyle and lots of others, that we were beaten 1-0 away and then 3-0 at home, and then we went to Swindon, the Swindon playoff final, where we obviously won it. And it was a strange game, the final, because we'd done a lot of things at Deepdale, where I changed the size of the pitch to Wembley. I made sure I kept to the same routine that I'd done on my previous 2 occasions with the players. We'd go to Wembley a couple of days before, look round. I didn't let the players take any pictures of the ground. I said, take your pictures, but I don't want them posted on social media, because we are here to work in 2 days' time. We're not here as tourists. We're not here as supporters. You'll only be remembered if you win this final. And Preston had lost 9 previous playoff campaigns, and so everything that we'd worked on went to a T. If you were to say that you win the game 4-0 and only have 35% possession of the football, you'd be very surprised, wouldn't you? But we knew how Swindon played. They kept the ball in the wrong areas. We pressurised them, and we had Garner and Beckford, who could destroy any team on the day, along with Kilkenny, along with sort of John Welsh, who's your midfield maestro and that. So get Paul Gallagher. We had some good players, but we were ruthless, and justifiably so, we got promoted.
I think in those sort of situations, being in a playoffs, especially a playoff final, I think sometimes you just need the rub of the green, and you know, whether you have a really good season doesn't always ultimately give you the luck that you need in a playoff final. But obviously that's what you did, and you got your team there. But I mean, talking of rub of the green, I mean, from having that at Preston to then moving on to your next club, which was obviously Sunderland, didn't get the rub of the green at all there, did you? It was one of these sort of things where, you know, I've got family that are Sunderland fans. So I know Becks has got some questions on this, but for me, I think my sort of question would probably think, you know, why and where do you think it went wrong, and, you know, why so badly?
Well, first and foremost, it was the toughest decision that I've ever had to make, because I was at Preston for 4.5 years, and we finished 11th the previous 2 years with the bottom 3 budget. But I knew that I got a group of players together that were really going to be top players. The likes of Barkes and Pearce and Gallagher was still there. Ben Davis was coming through to
Alan Brown.
Pardon?
Alan Brown.
Yeah, Alan Brown, who came in from Jordan Hugel, was another one. We'd put together this real group of players that I thought were young, hungry, had a fantastic desire. But I just felt that I didn't want to allow somebody to take Sunderland back to the Premier League when it could have been me. And sometimes you make these decisions, and sometimes you're hopeful that it works out right. Obviously, in hindsight, it wasn't the best decision to make, but ultimately, I wanted to test myself under pressure at a real top club with where things haven't been going well. And I've been at Preston for 4.5 years, and maybe I needed a bit of a change to really go and sort of test myself again, as I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think in terms of obviously being at Leeds, that was obviously another massive club, but Sunderland also, a massive club up north. So, in a way, it's sort of parallel to your time at Leeds, but unfortunately, just didn't work out as well. Which obviously they've got such a following, a big support, big stadium. I know for a fact that football is very much the heart and soul of the community there. So, I mean, I know, as I say, Becks has got some really great questions on your time there. So, yeah, Becks, take it away.
Yeah, look, as you said, your time at Preston. I look at that Preston team now, and it's one of my favourite teams in that championship, and it's something that you've built. It's hungry young players, or coming through from the lower leagues, which is exactly how it should be. But how much do you think sort of there's a lot. I know you've spoken about it many times before, the Sunderland till I die thing. How much do you think that played effect? Do you think some of the players who'd used to have been playing in the Premier League maybe thought that was sort of their way to, I don't know, maybe advertise themselves, maybe make it more about them as opposed to really fighting to get the biggest sides in the championship?
But I think I've said this a few times, that if I could have taken that Preston squad with me to Sunderland, I would have taken all of them. I would have swapped every player because I knew exactly what I was going to get from them. They were desperate to do well. They were still trying to make a living in the game, so they were desperate to get bigger contracts and extend it. Where you go to Sunderland, and obviously they'd been playing in the Premier League and earning tens of thousands of pounds. And probably that was the biggest difference. The players then didn't really have the desire, the hunger and didn't probably want to be there, a lot of them. And then if you couple that with the owner not wanting to invest any money into the football club, a lot of negativity around the place, it was very difficult to get the club going. And look, the documentary was what it was. It was okay. It wasn't spectacular in terms of how things come across, because there's lots of other things that people don't know about what was going on behind the scenes. But ultimately as well, you leave the football club and then you're thinking Chris Coleman's coming into the club, and you're thinking, well, Chris is going to be the one that is going to make sure that they might even, one, they shall definitely stay up, but ultimately as well, they might even get to the playoffs. And then Chris, with his experience, and everybody was buzzing that he was coming in to replace me, couldn't get the club going again. And that just probably showed you that there was a bigger underlying problem, not the manager's fault, you know what I mean? From players, from negativity, from owner not putting money in. It was deep-rooted problems that people I still think them problems are still there now.
Yeah. Is that, would you say it's probably, your time there, I don't want to dwell on it too much because you've had so much success elsewhere. That time's probably going to be the one that, because of Sunderland till I die, rightly or wrongly, is going to stick with you. When I look at your career, you've had such an eye for talent. There's so many players that you've picked up who have gone on to either play in the Premier League or are there now or on the cusp, like we said, that Preston team. Is that sort of your biggest frustration, that sort of maybe that one sort of spell at Sunderland has sort of tarnished what, you've been a promotion specialist and it's sort of tarnished your career a little bit?
Look, anytime you leave a club after 4 months, 5 months, whatever it was, to be fair, it's not going to look too good on your CV, is it really? But people within the game totally understand where or what was happening to us, and that's why, it sounds not a very nice thing to say, but with Chris Coleman not being able to succeed as well, it just proves that it wasn't just the manager's problem. So I don't regret taking the job. I would have regretted not taking it and something else happened off the back of it that they got promoted. It is just, there was just too many deep lying issues that, as we mentioned before, that how I knew there was no money there, or very limited money, but then to bring in 50, 60 million of sales that first summer, replace them with 12 new players for £1 million, was like, that shouldn't happen to a ex-Premier League club with parachute payments. But I didn't realise that there was going to be as little as money as there potentially was. And Yeah, so I think people, as I mentioned, Mick McCarthy made a thing of it the other week. I saw his interview that he said he totally understood why I went, but ultimately he doesn't understand why Sunderland got rid of me because they're no better off now.
No, exactly. And some of your signings are still, you brought in Aidan McGeady, you brought him from Preston with you, and he was arguably their best player last season. He's unfortunately fell out with the club now, but he's gone back up to the Championship level. Your eye for talent is is second to none. I'd say at the League One Championship level. I think Ollie Norwood was someone you brought through, who's now getting loads of plaudits in the Premier League. Who do you say is the sort of the player you're most proud of? Picking out from your career. Signing maybe on a good deal, or maybe giving him that chance, and he's gone on to prove that the doubt was wrong.
Because we were always shopping in a similar sort of market, especially at Preston. It was maybe anything up to 200 grand. Like Pearson was 200 grand. Callum Robinson was another one. Daniel Johnson was 50 grand. And then you go back to sort of even when I was at Blackburn, and I always remember to tell this story that I had two players came down on trial from Livingston at the same time, and obviously watching them train, and they were outstanding talents. And ultimately I had a decision to make, but I looked at them both. I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure these two will be suitable living in Blackpool together, given they were Scottish and Irish, maybe liked to drink, but absolutely diamond lads. So I decided to take the decision just to take one of them on, who turned out to be Wes Hoolahan. Oh. And the other one who I didn't take on, I ended up working with him a few years later at Leeds United, was Robert Snodgrass.
Wow, so, there you go.
Sometimes you have to make these decisions, and Wes might not have worked out how he did if he'd had Snod alongside him or vice versa. But Snod's always reminds me about this because of what had happened. I think the one that I'm quite really proud of, to be fair, was like Jordan Hugill, and he should be proud of himself because he suffered a bad injury when he was a young kid, ended up working behind a bar in Middlesbrough. Then he got into the Glen Hoddle Academy, then went to Port Vale, and we got tipped off about him that he was this young, big striker, but raw. We paid 20 grand for him, and we took a little punt. And to be fair to the kid, he wasn't in great shape the first pre-season because he was a big lad. But what he did do, he worked his socks off day in and day out to get better. He'd do extra running, extra shooting, extra training. He'd just do whatever he could do to try and be successful. And then you see him leave for £9 million to go to West Ham. You're thinking, wow, this lad deserves it. He deserves everything that he gets because he's put the yardsticks in with the time and effort to become a professional footballer. And people sometimes don't see the background of what happens with certain players.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously you had a couple of spells after your time at Sunderland. You went to Bradford and then back to Blackpool. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for you. But just wanted to know, have you got your passport in date? Because you don't seem to like coming down south for managerial jobs. Is that going to be sort of something you consider coming down south, or is it just you just love the north and you don't like us southern softies down here?
No. I've been partial to coming past sort of Leicester at times. You know what I mean? Even as a player, I never did. The furthest I got was at Leicester as a player. At the back when I left Blackburn as a player, Ian Holloway offered me a deal at QPR, but it was only a 1-year deal, and I wasn't certainly going to move down to London for that. But no, I'm open to offers. It's just been quite coincidental that of this M62 corridor where I live, and I can get across to Sunderland was only a couple of hours away, and as it happened, Sunderland was only an hour from my parents' house, so it was quite close. So I am a home bird, but I am partial. I can travel. I do have a car that allows me to get out of where I live with a little bit further. I can pay petrol money as well. So I don't know. Who knows what the future is going to hold? I was in India before lockdown. I went out to see Martin Bain, who was the chief exec at Sunderland at the time with me. He's running the Indian Super League over there. I went for a holiday, to be fair. That's all, just to Mumbai to see him for a break. And went to watch their big game, their playoff final at the end of the season, which was unfortunate for them because it's behind closed doors. But maybe somewhere further afield, maybe it might happen abroad or even classing down south abroad, maybe.
We're coming to the end of this tonight, Simon, and it's a bit of an enigma with you because obviously you started at Leeds and you obviously made your name elsewhere, obviously with Leicester, and just one last question. Well, actually, I've got two questions. I've got a really important one, but I haven't asked you yet. But this first one, what club would you call home?
Leeds United.
See, that confuses. It doesn't confuse me because obviously being a Leeds fan, you're going to say that, aren't you? But obviously, as a player, did you ever feel like you were at home elsewhere?
Yeah, Leicester. When I was at Leicester, it was like an unbelievable period in my life in terms of from leaving Leeds reserves to 3 months later playing in the Championship playoff final. The following year, I was part of a group that lost to Swindon. The third year, I was captain that beat Derby in the Championship playoff final to get to the Premier League. So to lift a trophy at Wembley was an unbelievable feeling. Relegation from the Premier League the following year. Promotion via the playoffs at Wembley against Crystal Palace again the following season. To then our next year in the Premier League, we finished 9th and won the League Cup. And that was just a period of time where everything we did, it was a great group of players. We all got on really well. We had spirit to die for, both on and off the pitch. And it had a lot of success. It had a few bad moments, losing 2 playoff finals, but we won 2 in the League Cup final as well. And even when I moved to Aston Villa after them 5-6 years there, I was still living in Leicester. So Yorkshire is my home, but Leicester is my second home.
Good. So now that brings us on to the ultimate question of tonight. We've been trying to get this player onto this podcast and we just can't seem to locate him. Now, I want to know, do you know Dele Adebola?
I played against him loads, to be fair, but he's not a player that I've got in my contacts list or anything like that.
We can't find him, Simon. We can't find him. Where is the guy? He's a complete recluse. Everyone we've spoken to. I mean, who have we spoke to, boys? John Salako, Rob Lee. Yeah. Who else have we spoke to?
Tony Dinning. We've got some more to come, but yeah, we can't find him. We cannot.
But then lads will have played with him as well. I never played. Nice. It's just. I bet between him and David Batty, you won't get all the bats as well because Bats he's got it tied in as well.
Quality. Look, Simon, mate, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you on tonight. It's been a pleasure. I mean, in no way, shape or form is your career as a manager in this country over. I mean, you've got so much to give. Be a shame to see you go overseas at this moment in time. I think you could do a job down south at a club that is quite close to us. So, until that comes up, we won't say anything. But, look, good luck for the future, mate. And thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Good luck to everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much.